It was the beginning of autumn in Dortmund, and the breeze carried a damp chill that whispered through the corridors of Clara Schumann's secondary school. The morning bell had just rung, echoing off the tall concrete walls, when she walked in. Annika Weiss. She had always been a peculiar girl, quiet, aloof, and drawn to the dark corners of life that most people preferred to ignore. Her obsessions ranged from tarot cards to obscure horror literature, and she often mumbled to herself under her breath. But today, Annika arrived with something new in her arms. A porcelain doll, wrapped in a faded navy scarf, its glassy eyes staring blankly at the floor. The room grew silent. No one spoke as she placed the doll gently on the empty desk beside her, smoothing its dress with a kind of care that made everyone uneasy. Her seat had always been next to the window, third row from the front. But now, it felt like that corner of the room was part of a different world altogether. Mira, who sat behind Annika, nudged Leon with her elbow. "Why she brought that thing here?" she whispered. Leon shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave the doll. Something about it felt wrong. Its face was cracked just above the left cheek, and one of its hands had a burn mark like it had been too close to fire. When the teacher entered, he stopped mid-stride, his eyes flicking to the strange, new classmate. "Annika," he said slowly, "we don't usually allow toys in the classroom." Annika looked up at him and smiled. "She's not a toy, sir. Her name is Margot." A few students chuckled under their breath. The teacher hesitated, then walked past without another word. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the room changed. The lights flickered more often. The radiator beneath the window clanked at odd intervals, like something crawling through the pipes. But the most unsettling part? Annika kept whispering to the doll between lessons. "She doesn't like maths. She thinks someone here is mean. She's been lonely since she left the old house." Everyone heard it. No one said a word. By the end of the day, the tension was so thick it was almost visible. As the final bell rang and chairs scraped against the floor, Mira turned around to say something to Annika, maybe to confront her, maybe to ask about the doll. But the desk beside Annika was empty. Margot was gone. Not packed into Annika's bag. Not held in her arms. Just gone. And no one saw who took her. Their usual room. Annika paused in the doorway. She turned her head slightly, as if listening to something behind her. "She said she wants to come too," she whispered, just loud enough for Leon to hear. The science lesson was uneventful until the equipment started reacting strangely. A Bunsen burner flared suddenly. A glass beaker cracked without reason. And every single thermometer in the room showed a drop of exactly 11 degrees for 5 full seconds, then returned to normal. Annika didn't seem surprised. By the time they returned to their usual classroom, the desk beside her was no longer empty. Margot was sitting there again. No one had brought her in. No one saw her arrive. But she was back. And now, there was something written in pencil on the desk. "She's watching the wrong one." It started that evening. Leon, still unsettled from the day's events, sat in his room finishing an essay when he heard it. A soft, clicking noise, like fingernails tapping on wood. He paused his music. The sound continued. Tap, tap, tap. He looked around. Nothing. But when he glanced at his desk drawer, something made his stomach twist. Slowly, he pulled it open. Inside was a torn scrap of paper. No name. No handwriting he recognized. Just 5 words. "She likes the quiet ones." Leon dropped the paper and backed away. He lived alone with his mom, and she certainly hadn't put it there. He tried to convince himself it was just a prank, someone at school, maybe Annika, but he couldn't explain how it had ended up inside his locked drawer. Elsewhere, Mira tossed in her sleep, sweating despite the cold. In her dream, she was standing in the classroom. Everyone else was frozen, motionless. Only the doll moved, slowly turning its head towards her, its porcelain mouth cracking open as if to speak. When she woke up, she found scratches, thin, curved lines on her arms, as if something with small hands had gripped her in the night. The next day, they both arrived at school early. Annika was already in her seat, Margot beside her once more. The doll was wearing a new ribbon, red, frayed at the edges. Mira stared at it, trying to remember if she'd seen it before. You shouldn't have read it, Annika said suddenly. Leon looked up. Read what? Annika smiled. She leaves warnings. Not everyone listens. Then she placed her hand gently on Margot's lap and whispered, Don't worry. He doesn't believe yet. The tension came to a head during history class. Mr. Remen, the oldest teacher at the school, was already having a rough day. The projector wouldn't turn on, the whiteboard pens were dry, and half the class looked like they hadn't slept. When he saw the doll on the desk again, he lost patience. Annika, I've warned you. That thing is distracting. Leave it in your locker, or it will be confiscated. Annika didn't move. I said. She doesn't want to be locked up, Annika interrupted softly. A silence fell over the room. Mr. Remen, visibly irritated, marched forward and reached for the doll. The moment his hand touched Margot's arm, every light in the classroom flickered violently, followed by a loud crack. The smartboard behind him shattered. No one screamed. No one moved. Mr. Remen froze, his hand still on the doll, then recoiled as if burned. Without another word, he ordered Annika, Leon, and Mira to stay for detention after school, citing disruption and disrespect. That afternoon, the three of them sat in silence as the sky outside darkened far too quickly for autumn. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Mr. Remen sat at his desk, massaging his hand. Annika leaned toward the others. She didn't like him. She doesn't like most adults. Leon stared at her. What is it with this doll? Is this some kind of joke? Annika shook her head slowly. She's older than jokes. And she chose to come here. At exactly 5 o'clock, the bell rang to signal end of detention. But no one could open the classroom door. It was locked from the outside. And on the blackboard, written in a chalk no one saw anyone pick up, were the words, She wants the third one now. They got out eventually. The janitor found the door wedged shut from the inside, though no one could explain how. The following morning, someone was missing. Lucas Klein, a quiet boy who always sat near the back, never showed up. At first, the teachers thought he was sick. But when his mother rang the school in panic, saying he hadn't come home the night before, things escalated quickly. Police were called. Questions were asked. The school became tense, whispery, and suspicious. But Annika remained unchanged. She warned him, she said during lunch, sipping apple juice slowly. He didn't listen. Leon and Mira sat across from her, unsure whether to be angry, afraid, or both. You think this is your fault? Mira asked. Annika shook her head. It's not mine. It's hers. Later that day, when Mira opened her locker, she found a photograph pinned to the inside. It was old, sepia-toned, edges curled with age. 5 children stood in front of a school building not unlike theirs. In the center sat a doll. Same porcelain face. Same cold eyes. On the back of the photograph, written in perfect cursive, For Remain. She never forgets. 2 days passed. Lucas remained missing. Posters appeared across Dortmund, his photo printed in grainy black and white. Police combed the city, questioning students, teachers, even Annika. But nothing new surfaced. At school, things grew darker. More students fell ill. Some refused to enter the classroom. Others whispered about shadows that moved on their own, doors that opened with no wind, and the sound of tiny footsteps in the corridor after hours. Leon was beginning to lose sleep. One evening, frustrated and restless, he broke into the school library. His mom thought he was at a study group. He wasn't. He had a plan. Annika had mentioned that Margot was old, older than jokes. That meant history. And the one thing the library had plenty of was dusty, forgotten school archives. He searched for hours, flicking through yearbooks, staff records, local newspaper cuttings. Then he found it. A register. Handwritten. 1948. Clara Schumann School had once been a boarding school for orphans. It had closed for 2 decades after a fire in the East Wing. One page stood out, 5 names, all scratched out in red ink. Underneath, a brief note. Found deceased, no visible wounds. Dolls confiscated. Case closed. Leon ran his fingers down the page and froze when he saw the last line. Margot Weiss. Age, 9, status, unclaimed. She had a surname, the same as Annika. Leon confronted her the next day. He waited until lunch, when the cafeteria buzzed loud enough to cover their voices. Mira was already at the table, watching him nervously. He slammed the book down beside her tray. You're related to her, aren't you? Annika didn't flinch. She was my great-aunt, she said softly. I never met her. No one talks about her. Not until she came back. Mira leaned forward. Came back from where? Annika picked at her bread roll, eyes fixed on the table. They say she died in that fire. But she didn't. Not properly. Her body was found, yes. But something stayed behind. Something angry. Leon felt the air around them shift. A hum, subtle, like electricity. She used to sit in this school just like us. Same seat. Same window. Annika looked up, her voice now low and steady. She doesn't want revenge. She wants company. That afternoon, the power went out in the school. Every single computer monitor turned black. Phones stopped working. The clocks froze at 3:33 p.m. When the lights flickered back on, a new message had appeared on the chalkboard. One will speak. One will follow. One will vanish. The next day was Friday. Annika wasn't at school. The air in the building felt heavier without her, and oddly colder. Leon, now obsessed with solving the mystery, begged Mira to help him search the East Wing, the section rebuilt after the 1948 fire. The janitor's key had been left unattended near the staff room. They took it. The corridor was quiet. Dust coated the windows, and the floorboards creaked with every step. At the very end, an old utility closet waited. Leon turned the key. It clicked open with a reluctant groan. Inside, everything was covered in white sheets. Tools. Shelves. And a trapdoor. They exchanged a glance. Leon pulled it open. A narrow staircase led downward into pitch blackness. The air that rose from below was stale and sharp, like burnt paper and damp wood. With phone flashlights in hand, they descended. The space beneath was wide, an old storage area, perhaps once a bomb shelter. Along one wall stood rows of cabinets, each labeled with a student's name from decades past. But in the center, sitting in a wooden chair, was Margot. She was alone, eyes open, hands folded. Leon moved closer, heart thudding. She's been waiting, Mira whispered. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the darkness behind them. She comes here when she's angry. It was Annika. Annika stood at the bottom of the stairs, torchlight flickering against her pale face. She walked forward slowly, her eyes not leaving Margot. She's getting stronger, she said. The longer she's here, the more she remembers. Leon stepped between them. What does she want? Annika looked at him. She wants someone to stay. Mira gripped his arm tightly. You mean she's looking for a host? Annika shook her head. She's looking for balance. One spirit trapped, one mind broken, one body given freely. Leon remembered the message on the board. Speak. Follow. Vanish. Mira had spoken. He had followed. Only one remained. No, he said aloud, stepping back. But Margot's head turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Eyes on Mira. Annika's voice cracked. She's chosen. Mira staggered, as if pulled by invisible strings. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her eyes rolled back. Leon shouted, reaching for her, but Annika held him back. If you touch her now, you'll take her place. In the silence that followed, the dolls stood. Not floated. Stood. And took a step forward. It was almost midnight when the bells of St. Reinold's Church tolled across the city. Leon stood alone at the top of the school's old bell tower, Myra's phone clenched in his fist. The last thing it had recorded was static, and a single frame of Margot's face, closer than it should have been. He had followed the whispers here. Ever since they left the cellar, Mira hadn't spoken. She walked, but not by choice. Her eyes remained vacant, as if her soul was elsewhere. The doctors said she was in shock. Annika had disappeared again. but something called Leon to this place. As he reached the top, the air grew thin. The floorboards groaned beneath his steps. In the center of the tower, on a circle drawn in ash, Margot stood again. Alone. Waiting. Annika's voice came from the shadows. You can end it. Leon stepped forward.
How?
You give her what she wants. A life for a life. A name for a name. The wind howled through the open windows. Below them, the city lights dimmed. The bell swayed gently above, creaking. Margot turned to face him and smiled.